You are live.
Okay, hello.
Hello there, how are you tonight? This is the John and Kathy reminiscence of our old times.
Tonight we decided we'd talk about scouting, our years of being scout leaders.
Not that it was one of the most talked about questions, or one of the ones we wanted us to follow up on, but it's also a big part of our life for many years back in the middle of, not the middle of time or anything, but just the middle of our family. And this kind of goes back to a time when the church was really involved in the Boy Scouts of America. And it was at a time before that they decided, later, many years later, they decided to get out of it. But I remember early days in my life when I was 8 years old, I got involved in Cub Scouting. I mentioned that last time we had our discussion. But that it was a really important time because I made some good friendships back then. Not that I know where any of them are at today, but
Tell them about your ranks.
we had the ranks of a
Wolf.
yeah, the wolf was first, then the bear, and then we had the lion. This was before they had Weebo Scouts. And I had earned all those ranks up and through that time frame, through lion, and all the associated ribbons that would go through it. My mom, for a couple of those years, was a Cub Scout,
Den leader.
Den leader. Thank you. Then they moved on up to Boy Scouts when I turned 12. And at that time I was, it's, in the church, it seems like the most producing scout troops as far as young men in ranks would be involved would be those whose scout leaders were really committed to helping the young men be actively involved in scouting. And so the first couple of years in scouting, I had a real good scoutmaster. I got up through the rank of Star Scout, but he was an attorney in the JAG Corps of the Marine Corps or Navy. And so he was transferred to Washington, D.C., and to the Pentagon.
And what about your scouting?
Well, he left, my scouting went downhill.
It's kind of hard without a good leader.
And so that was pretty much it.
So I wanted to tell you that when Nate was getting ready to be 8 years old, we were living in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. He was, we were living in a branch, and there weren't enough boys to even do Cub Scouts, to have our own pack within the branch. And so we asked around about having one at the school. They went to Benvenue Elementary School, and we started a Cub Scout pack.
Yeah, I was the Cub Master, the Pack Master, whatever, Cub Master. And then Kathy served as the first den leader.
It was hard with so many kids.
But we had great participation from their parents, which is critical.
The kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we did that for a couple of years, got that started enrolling. And then we moved out to Arizona.
Wait, I have to tell you what happened there in Rocky Mount. I was the den leader, and I remember one time, I don't know exactly how it happened, but we were probably going on some kind of an activity to the pond, which is kind of close to our house. And so we came home, and a neighbor called because Jacob was wandering around with no supervision. I probably went with a bunch of kids and came home with a bunch of kids, and I was missing him. I didn't miss him because I was busy with the other kids. Anyway, a neighbor came bringing our wayward child home. That was kind of funny. I liked it better when Dad was probably when he went as a branch president, and then he couldn't be the PAC committee chairman anymore. So then I took over the PAC committee chairman responsibility, and I liked that better because it was only once a month. Putting on a big party once a month for all the parents and their kids, it was a lot of fun. Okay, now you can talk about moving to Arizona.
So anyway, we moved to Arizona in 85, 84, 85, right there in December. And at that time, I was asked to serve on the Scout Committee, and Jacob and Nathan was a Scout at the time.
Your mic is not picking up very well. Where's the thing at?
Right here.
Yeah, I have to put it maybe out here somewhere.
Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties.
Cutting out, sorry.
Okay, back to it. So as a member of the Scout Committee, they asked me if I would come along and chaperone or go with the boys to Scout Camp. And in Arizona, our premier Scout Camp was called Geronimo. We went to two camps while we were there in Chandler. And then later on, I would go back again to Geronimo with Brian, I think maybe with Johnny as well. And anyway, we went back from St. George at that time. And then we...
So when I was in Arizona, when we moved to Arizona, my only position was, because I had 7 kids, I was really busy, but I was the publicity commissioner on the district level. So I would write stories about scouting for the newspaper and such.
And so anyway, when we go to
El Paso,
I later on became the Scout Master at that point. I was always on the committee, I guess. But I served on as a Scout Master there for 5 years. As we were setting up for today, I asked Eric if he remembered the first experience he had with us and scouting. He couldn't remember anything particular. I reminded him it was the day that he called down to talk to me to ask for Priscilla's hand in marriage, if he could have his permission of the family.
You were working on somebody's project.
Mike's Eagle project was painting the striping on the parking lot at the Stake Center in El Paso. And at first, my initial response to Kathy,
I came down with the phone or whatever. We didn't have cell phones then, so I came down to say Eric had called. It was very important. He wouldn't talk to me. He wants to talk to you.
I hesitated by saying something to the effect of, "Why do I want to talk to him?" And of course, I was just joking, having a good time with the whole situation. But this was the first time. And I'd only be asked this question twice. So this is the first time I was going to be asked this question.
Yes. Okay, let me tell you what I did in El Paso. By that time, the kids were getting bigger, and I became the roundtable commissioner. I liked the monthly thing, and instead of being the PAC committee chairman, I was the roundtable commissioner. And it was interesting that the church there didn't have really active scouting. We did have a PAC in our ward and that sort of thing, but nobody came to roundtable for training. I was the roundtable commissioner. We had lots of participation by the other community groups, churches and service clubs, but almost no LDS people ever came to our monthly training. That's okay. Later on, I was called to be district camp director, but I had to go to training first. So it seemed like I went to New Mexico for training for a weekend. And then we did day camp. Now, I've been involved in different wards where they have Cub Scout day camp. Maybe it's in the morning at the church. They'll have something for the boys to do. This was a big day camp. We had over 200, probably 250 Cub Scouts were involved. We had 20 to 25 leaders, maybe more, leaders involved. I had to do training for all those leaders. That was only for the boys, and we had to have the leaders on the staff. So it was quite involved, lots of prep work in advance. And the Cub Scout day camp was day camp. You went at 8 o'clock in the morning on the other side of El Paso. So we had to go across the city from our east side over to the west side where the day camp area was. And it lasted all day from 8 o'clock to 3 p.m. And it lasted for a week. So it was a lot of fun. It was like a job for the people who were involved. It was hot, and it was a lot of fun. I just remember we did a lot of things. That was Cub Scout day camp.
I think one year we said hold it on the east, or on the west side. You held it on the east side there at the Stake Center.
That might have been an odd year.
On the ball field.
Okay. Okay.
At this time I was put in as a scoutmaster, as I mentioned. And in my own experience in scouting as a young boy, I only made it to the rank of star. But in the meantime, I'd had a lot of wonderful experiences with other leaders. And they talked about how sometimes you have to have goals and start this goal at a real young age on these young men. So my goal, and I don't know how it was to all the boys in my family necessarily, but I set a goal for them, that in order for them to get their driver's license, they had to be an Eagle Scout. Eric comments that we got a question coming in.
Just a comment. Can you hear me? Let's see. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Marie just said, I remember helping with day camp at our stake center when I was 12 to 15.
Oh, okay. So Marie was on the staff, day camp staff. That's good. Great.
I'm sure Mom would have.
I recruited. Okay. Tell us about your scouting leader experiences. One time you went on a 50-mile hike.
Yeah, for a summer camp one year we made it the culminating hike for our hiking merit badge requirement. We already had to have we had to have a 20-mile hike plus a 50-mile backpack trip. 20-mile hike had to be in one day. And then we had 5 10-milers besides that. So we planned this one up in the Cloudcroft area up at 10,000 feet elevation.
So it'd be cooler.
Be cooler, but there'd be a lot less air to suck to.
You mean the elevation made it hard to breathe?
Yeah. And so we took about 16 or 18 boys, and we had 4 leaders set up. And 2 of the leaders, I and one other leader went on the hike, the physical hike. The other 2 leaders were back at the stake campground, which we were hiking around, so to speak, up in that same area. And then they would meet us either in the afternoon or usually in the afternoon after we finished our hikes.
With food and sort of thing.
Yeah, they kind of restock us with food and stuff like that. Then we wouldn't see them for either the next day or the day after that.
Okay, I had to interject here. Nathan had a really good scout leader who was also an Army captain or whatever, Davis Wallace.
He was an Army sergeant.
Sergeant. And he took the boys one time. Did you go with him up to
No, I didn't.
New Mexico? Tell him about that trip.
Well, that trip involved snow.
And wet.
I didn't like snow. So anyway, But Davis Wallace and other leaders in the priest quorum,
And Nathan was one of the older scouts at this time, probably
17.
15, 16.
Somewhere maybe 17. Anyway, they were lost and they were running out of food and they were in tough straits.
It ended up Nathan had to go hiking in advance because they had boys that were having cold, wet feet. What was it called?
Trench foot.
Trench foot, because their feet were wet and cold, and so they had to go ahead of the other group to find help.
Yes, and so Nathan and about 2 or 3 others, one was Brother Wallace, I think, and then another scout went with Nathan, and the 3 of them were out hiking ahead of the troop, further down the trail faster.
And how far did they go? 30 plus miles, right?
I can't remember how many it was in a day.
It was a lot of miles in one day. Because it was a rescue effort.
Yeah, they were putting out. They were just all, they were just really going as fast as they could. And Brother Wallace commented something to the effect that in all of his days he had never seen a young man hike out of a situation like that. Even he had, as an Army sergeant, he had problems keeping up with Nathan because of how fast Nathan was going to help get out there. So they got down, finally they got out of the wilderness area where they ran into the park rangers. And they came out and they got them up to where the boys were and they rescued the boys that way.
Okay. Exciting. Now, on his own 50-miler, I remember Brother Lund was an emergency room doctor, and he had boys in the same scout troop, so he was also on the hike with you on those 50-milers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a good one to have along. One time when I wasn't the leader, well, maybe I was. We were doing something where this was Mike, as the young boys were trying to do. Oh no, I wasn't the leader. Sister Lund was the leader, and they were trying to cut apples and make like a jack-o'-lantern out of an apple as an experience for Cub Scouting to do something. But she didn't want to give them kitchen knives because she was afraid they would be too sharp. So they were using butter knives, and Mike ended up sticking it in his hand. So then she had to take him to the emergency room for Dr. Lund to stitch up his hand. Nice to have connections.
Mike, you probably still have the scar of that knife wound.
Yes. Okay, so that was in St. George.
That was in El Paso.
Okay, let me tell you first of all. So Nathan in El Paso finally made it to Eagle, just in time. He's one that's always said, if you wait till the last minute, it only takes a minute. So
maybe we should have told his kids not to listen to this.
he got his Eagle just before he turned 18. He finished the requirements, and then he had the Court of Honor after he was 18. I remember Stan came for the Court of Honor. Then when Dad was a scoutmaster, Jacob was a scout, and Mike came up. He was 11 at the time. Came up to go along with some of those 20-mile hikes and that sort of thing. And then what happened with those two?
Well, at the time of Eric and Priscilla's wedding, everybody in the family was over to El Paso. And so while we were there, we had the Court of Honor for Jacob and for Mike at the same time, as well as Jacob's good friend Nate Smith received his Eagle Scout Award at the same time. So that was kind of unusual.
It was fun for the two brothers
Jacob
to get...
was about 16.
And Mike was, I think, 13.
He was just about to turn 14. So yeah, he was 13.
But here again, if you have a good leader, you can get things done more quickly. And so Dad was the leader. Mike and Jake both came along at the same time and got their Eagle. That was great.
Yep.
And then talk about Johnny going to scout camp.
Well, I had a couple of good experiences with Johnny. One of them we talked about briefly earlier on one of these episodes. But Johnny came to me, and as a scoutmaster, I had the responsibility to help get the boys signed up. And select their activities for the week that they were at camp. And so they came along, and Johnny came to me, and as I was looking through his, he was, of course, one of the younger boys. He may have been 11, turning 12, while we were at scout camp. And so he was only able to come because I was the scout leader. Anyway, I talked to Johnny about archery. He talked to me about archery and how he wanted to do that so much. And I said, yeah, but Johnny, you need to work on these other programs for first class scout and to get those anchored done and so that you could get that award. But he says, yeah, but I want to do archery too. I said, well, I don't think I have time. And archery is a little bit of a hard badge to get, just because of the amount of time it takes to do all the shooting rounds and all the scoring and get back and forth. Because the archery range is not right in the middle of the scout camp. It's removed away from the other ranges. And so for safety purposes. So here we are, the end of scout camp was done. And it came time for our award ceremony Friday night. And they got to the point where they're announcing the archery awards. And to them they had the highest award given, or the biggest improvement in archery for that week.
The Robin Hood Award.
Yeah, the Robin Hood Award, that's what it was called. And so as they gave out the awards, they came to that award and they said, okay, now for the most improved archery scout for that week. They announced Johnny Hansen. I was just shocked. I was about ready to fall off the back of the log I was sitting on. I was just so surprised.
When did you have time for that?
I was just so proud of Johnny for what he had done, because it exhibited the tenacity it takes. And I look back at that now and I think that probably in those early years, Johnny was developing those skills, those that he would need, traits that he would need to become a doctor of engineering in aeronautical engineering, because that is not an easy career field.
And so Johnny was our 4th Eagle Scout, and then Brian's coming along. And in St. George, we had good leaders to help him get going. And
Well,
you weren't the leader by then. You weren't in Scouts.
No, I was in the bishopric, but I was not the scout leader. But a fellow family relation would be. And that was Brother Seth Hawker.
Seth Hawker.
And Seth and I were good friends. And that's the same Seth Hawker that was Brandy's dad. And so our families grew together all those years in El Paso. Little did we know that Brian and Brandy were going to get together.
Well, he was the scout. He was the scoutmaster in El Paso, not St. George.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we moved to St. George when Brian was about 10 or 11. And so he wasn't really in Boy Scouting, and he was in Cub Scouts. So Johnny finished up in El Paso.
St. George.
In St. George, no, in El Paso.
He got his Eagle in El Paso?
He finished up most of the merit badges in El Paso and got awarded his Eagle in St. George.
Okay.
With Max Rose.
Okay.
Mike, he finished up his, I mentioned earlier, with Jacob.
What about Brian?
Jacob repaired the stands in the stake ball field that we had there.
Good. For his merit badge?
Yeah, for his
Eagle Scout project?
Right. Nathan had done his on personal security and they helped to mark those who wanted it done. They helped mark their identification on the back of equipment. It was expensive and thought of more at that time than we do today. But it was on VCRs or cameras and onto VCRs, cameras.
Video recorders.
Yeah, and televisions and stuff like that.
Okay.
So he did that for them.
So when Brian was doing scouting in St. George, did you help, or did you go to scout camps with him?
I went to scout camps with him. I took the boys to Geronimo one year.
From St. George.
From St. George. And the reason why we were able to go to Geronimo is because the ward troop there had a flag program. So all the camps were always paid for by the troop based upon the boys' participation.
So we were living in St. George. You went down to Arizona to Camp Geronimo.
Yeah. Then another year we went to Thunder Ridge, which I think is the one that's up out of Cedar City, up in the mountain there.
And Brian got his Eagle. Everything was finished for his Eagle when we lived in St. George, and we moved to Bountiful when he was a junior.
Senior, he was about to start
almost to be a senior in high school. And so then he was awarded his recommendation, and approval came when we were living in Bountiful. He got his award there. Okay, interesting.
So that was all 5 boys getting their 5 Eagles.
That was important for us, all 5 boys getting their Eagles. And at the same time, the girls had to have similar requirements. They couldn't get their driver's license until they had received their Young Women's Recognition Award, which actually you had to wait till you were a Miami to get that. So they didn't think it was very fair because the boys could get their Eagle earlier. But anyway.
Still, the license didn't come any earlier.
Just so you know, Priscilla didn't get her driver's license till she was a student at Rick's College. So she finally got it. Marie, I think, started driving earlier. But it's interesting that I was involved. When I was in St. George, the only scouting thing I did was as a primary president. I was over scouting as a primary president, but didn't really have that much involvement. And curious that I was never invited to be in the Young Women's programs with the girls. So I never went to girls' camp with them, and I didn't do any of those things. I was always working in the primary.
Now our downline, generation-wise, Mike has been active in the Cub Scouting and I think some Boy Scouting activities with a non-LDS troop.
Again, Washington, D.C.
Principally because the church has dropped the scouting program.
This is before that happened. But because of where they lived in Washington, D.C., there was a very few members in a very large geographic area. So it was inconvenient and implausible to have all the boys from the ward go to 20 miles away or 50 miles away to church. Minutes is actually what it is, because it's a congested city, to go for PAC meetings or den meetings. So Mike was a leader in a Catholic church.
Well, there was a Catholic church.
He was a den leader, assistant den leader.
And he did that for about 3 years, I think. And then I think that Brooks has done some scouting 1 year, maybe 2 years of Cub Scouting.
Jacob was involved. He was a scoutmaster, I think, when they first were married.
Eric and Priscilla have had Caleb and Jared.
Both get their Eagles.
Both got their Eagle Awards. But that requirement to get your Eagle Award now for a driver's license is a little hard-pressed.
Yeah. The church is no longer a participant in Boy Scouts of America. The church has its own program because of the worldwide church. Boy Scouts of America only applied to the U.S., and so they have a program that now is more general worldwide.
And then one other thing on that would be that I believe that there are essential needs for everybody to experience both leadership opportunities and for responsibilities as a good citizen to participate in their neighborhoods.
Let me tell you about Priscilla. So Priscilla has been a a Boy Scout trainer. She's gone to, what do they call that? Arrow Order?
It's called a Wood Badge.
Wood Badge. She's got a Wood Badge training, and she's been a Wood Badge trainer for many years. She would go with the groups and do Wood Badge training. One year she even went to do a Wood Badge for all deaf leaders. That was very interesting. I didn't go with her, but I know she told me about it. So that's the one thing that she's had a hard time giving up after the church is no longer affiliated with the Boy Scouts of America. She was so...
She's still been doing it, though.
Yeah, she's been doing it. She's so committed. And you make so many friends when you're working in leadership in a community organization like Boy Scouts of America. Or Cub Scouts.
Yeah. So, anyway, unless there's any more questions flooding in on the airwaves, we'll continue on.
We'll do it again next week. Let us know if you have anything special you want to talk about.
Are we out of time?
Yes, we're out of time.
I guess so.
Very interesting. We'll sing our song again. This is actually a camp song. I learned it.
We ought to just explain this a little bit. This song, when we sang it last week, in our last episode,
I learned it at girls' camp.
we used to sing this around the table at dinner time in our home in Vista, California.
When he was growing up.
And so it was a television program that was based on, I can't remember the exact name of it.
The Happy Wanderer.
I think something like that. Anyway, it used this song as its theme song. And
If you look it up online, that's the name of the song, The Happy Wanderer.
And we would sing it having dinner, watching this TV every week.
I love to go a-wandering along the mountain path. And as I go, I like to sing my knapsack on my back.
All the reed, all the rock, all the reed, all the rock,
All the reed, all the rock,
all the reed,
my knapsack on my back. Okay.
See you next week.